And you thought Baylor could only recruit in football. What if I told you they were in for the number one basketball recruit in the entire country? On Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. We really appreciate you guys, you everydayers, and those just joining in for the first time. It's been a hot recruiting summer. I mean, we already talked about it yesterday, as in many days, but yesterday, big time. But also, basketball still exists here, and actually Baylor's pretty good at it, if you remember correctly, and they are in for one of the best recruits they will have ever gotten if they're able to get his commitment. And we'll also talk about posterity later on in the show, and who needs a statue at Baylor? Who needs that? Who needs it anywhere? But we do a podcast about the Baylor Bears, so we're going to talk about who needs it for Baylor. Now, in terms of the football recruiting standpoint, I mean, look, I just did another episode yesterday. Rylan Morris, the running back, becomes one of the best recruits in Baylor history. In fact, this has changed hands a couple of times throughout this summer. The 247 top 10 highest rated recruits Baylor's had in the recruiting era, which is roughly the last, or I should say like the online recruiting database era, which is roughly the last 20 years or so. The Bears have added top 10 guys. It's happened a couple of times throughout this. In fact, to catch you up on it, Taz Williams Jr., who was one of the most offered player in Texas, one of the most sought after receivers in the country, is only 29th in the database in Baylor's all-time history. His pal Camoran Morgan now bumps down to 11th. Running back Michael Turner was 9th. Now he's 10th because Rylan Morris checks in at number 7. 3 top 11 guys right now are committed to you. 3 of your top 11 commits of all time are coming in, and that doesn't even include Taz Williams or Corey Watson. Unbelievable prospects in their own right. This is historic what Baylor is doing. It is incredible coming off a 3-9. I'm not going to get too bogged down into that because we've talked about it, but goodness me. That is incredible. And they might not be done yet. You've seen some of the vague tweets if you're out on Twitter. Some of the Baylor coaches implying that they are not done with big-time prospects committing in the class of 2025 and 2026. Our friend Will Turboff of 247, he put out there too, Bears aren't done. He did that Elmo with the flames behind him emoji, conveying chaos. And no one said it explicitly, but if you follow 247 and follow Baylor Recruiting, you might see what they're talking about. Caleb Burns, the linebacker from Cy Falls, who's in the class of 2025, high 3-star. He was one that was an intriguing prospect Baylor's been on for a long time. Well, earlier this month, he committed to Texas Tech. Tough loss for Baylor. In fact, you'll remember in the context, it was a week of, hey, we got to look out for these couple of guys here. Caleb Burns, Corey Watson, Camoran Morgan, Jackson Blackwell actually committed within that. And Caleb Burns was the first one, and he committed to Tech, and it was like, oh boy. Oh no. Is this going to be a bad week? But then Corey Watson committed, and then Camoran Morgan, the long shot, he committed. And then this momentum started to really fall into place. And now it might be that Caleb Burns is like, I want to get in on this too. Because while committed to Tech, the crystal ball prediction on 247 has 100% of a flip to Baylor. Whoa. Where did that come from? This ain't even an offensive skill position guy. You know, the Keenan Hall puzzle piece. But he might be saying, hey, I want to be in on this. We've got some really great players from around this state, from my area, from the Metroplex. He's from Houston area, but his area and the Metroplex, I should say, like it's starting to take off a little bit. And Caleb Burns would be a nice addition to that, right? I mean, we're talking about a lot of offensive guys, and here's one who finished up his junior season with 73 tackles, 18 and a half tackles for loss, 6 sacks, a pick, and a couple of forced fumbles. This guy is getting into your backfield and getting into coverage. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that for a team that that can use some blue chip recruits on the defensive side of the football as well as the offense. A couple of pass breakups in there as well. Athlete. This is someone Will Turboff has talked about on the show, not just tweeting out there. He was actually came on the show and talked about Caleb Burns and what he liked about his athleticism. And he went to a couple of practices down there in Cyprus at Cy Falls to see him put on a show. And he's one that's been sought after by all those top Texas teams that Baylor's competing with. You know, we mentioned it was a commitment to Tech, but he was also looked at by UH and SMU and TCU, and that's kind of like all of those schools together, man. That's more Baylor's speed, so to speak. They've been beating out some really big time programs the last couple of weeks, and while that's great, in a weird way, these are kind of the battles they need to win too. The guys that are being looked at by Tech and Houston and SMU and TCU, to win those is still mega important. By the way, Caleb Burns did use one of his 3 official visits at Baylor. It was Baylor, UH, the hometown team, and Tech. Baylor was the first of those 3, which usually doesn't lead to a commitment, which it didn't. Tech was the last one. That's usually what leads to a commitment, and that's what happened. But there is time for him to flip, and there is at least some experts out there thinking it will be Caleb Burns flipping and adding to an already outstanding recruiting class. But basketball has a great recruiting class coming into this year that we're going to see on the court this year, and it might be even stronger in the future with at least one of these prospects that they're looking at. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you guys know I love the sports. You love the sports. It's why you're listening and watching this podcast. But the sports, they're not as sporty as they usually are right now. All right. We all love baseball, but we're looking for a little bit more. We're looking for a little bit more of excitement in our sports right now. But as you know, the playoffs have wound down, the Olympics going on, kind of giving us some. It's not as sporty as we need it to be. So this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Just head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. Again, all customers, boost or bonus daily. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Kind of lost in the fold with how good a summer Baylor football has been having on the recruiting trail is the fact that Baylor basketball is pretty good at recruiting. They're pretty good on the court as well. In fact, they have really, we've talked about it over and over, turned a page the last 4 or 5 years, not even 3 or 4 years of how they can go out there and recruit and what caliber of player they can come to play in Waco. And the next in that line is AJ Dybantsa. Okay. Now, it's one of those where you might not know the name now, but in a couple months, everyone's going to know it. He's the number 1 ranked player in the class of 2025. And he does have an offer from Baylor, and Baylor is on what is perceived to be the short list. And this kid is incredible. Dybantsa, who's from not very far from where I'm recording this right now. He's from Brockton, Massachusetts. He has played at Prolific Prep, where Yves Misi played, and now he is playing prep basketball in Utah, and he had reclassified to move up to the class of 2025, and here he sits as the number 1 prospect in the entire class. And again, this is still like new ground for us. I mean, we're talking the number 1 guy, and Baylor has really only been in the conversation for that number one spot once, and it was when Trey Johnson was the number one guy in the 2024 class. Of course, he kind of dipped on the final list, and VJ Edgecombe was ahead of him, and VJ might be the best player in terms of, high school rating that Baylor has ever gotten. And they could one up that a year later with AJ Dybantsa. This kid has got it all, especially offensively. He has got the length, he has got touch, he has got incredible athleticism, all the things that VJ has and might be a little raw in some areas. AJ has that and then some. But this is not an anti-VJ thing. This is just to show how great AJ Dybantsa already is at the high school level. I mean, he is turning heads all over the country. In fact, the scouting report on him on 247 is one of the best I've ever read, just in terms of like how ferociously positive it is about the kid. It doesn't even necessarily need to go into like, here's all the things he does well, which it does. But I just wanted to read you a little bit from it from Adam Finkelstein, who is probably the number one guy for 247 in terms of basketball. A 6'9" jumbo wing with a wingspan exceeding 7 feet, emerging 200+ pound frame, and an advanced understanding of how to score from his spots, even in a half-court game. AJ Dybantsa is the best prospect in high school basketball. All the things in that sentence are mouth-watering, okay? Because those are the things that even a lot of number one prospects don't have. Even the best of the best. They develop that, a lot of them, but they don't have that already in high school. I mean, we're talking about a 7-footer who's going to have the frame as well, the 200-pound frame. He's going to be used to playing with that 6'9" with the 7-foot wingspan. You know what I mean? He's going to fill into that frame, knows how to play with it, and knows how to play in a half-court game. That is like can't miss stuff. The best prospect in high school basketball. Dybantsa possesses a lethal pull-up game with a high release and smooth ball rotation. You don't have to be a scout to see that on his highlights, truly. Like, timeout to the side from Adam Finkelstein. You don't need to be Adam Finkelstein to see that. It's incredible. Been a celebrated prospect ever since he entered high school. To add on to that, when he first started in Massachusetts, he was an 8th grader playing varsity as a starter in prep basketball. He's not someone who kind of broke through, hit a growth spurt at a public school, and all of a sudden started going prep. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This kid was good enough for prep from day freaking one, as a 13-year-old was playing as a starter on the varsity. He was the leading scorer at 2023 Peach Jam, which is one of the premier amateur competitions for these high school guys in the summer. As an underclassman, he did that 2023 and shows flashes of untapped potential on defense thanks to his size and his movement skills. The bottom line is this: Dybantsa controls his own future. If he continues on his current path, then there's no one in high school basketball with more potential than him. That's the kind of guy Baylor's getting in for. Also has offers from Arkansas, Alabama, USC, Auburn, Kentucky, BYU. He has his pick. Anywhere in the country he wants to go. And by the way, Baylor offered him last year, which would have been his sophomore year before the reclassification. Actually, it was right around the time of reclassification. Okay. They were there before Kentucky was. They were there before Kansas was. They were there before Duke was. For as much as we've talked about that, for being a benefit in football, to identify that talent and get in there early and develop that relationship, of course we have to say that for basketball too. And that's what Baylor has right now with AJ Dybantsa. Maybe that's the upper hand. That's all you need. If that's the upper hand, we'll take it. And I do mention where he's from because there was another pretty big time high school prospect about the same size who also came from Massachusetts, a city very similar to Brockton, and played his prep basketball out in the West. His name is Jason Asamoah. He plays for Baylor. That, you don't think that'll help? I'm not saying it gets the deal done, but that stuff helps. Oh, and also, His family is originally from Africa. Actually, his dad is from Africa originally. His mom is from Jamaica. How many times do we see these international players loving Baylor, thriving at Baylor, especially from the continent of Africa? I mean, we could just go down the list. Nuni Omot is playing at the Olympics right now. You just had Eve Misi, a first-round pick. And the list will go on and on. I mean, Joe Lualachuo, name him, man. Flo Thamba, the starting center on the national championship team. Baylor does really, really well with international players. And VJ Edgecombe would fall in that same category. And you're bringing him in this year. That stuff helps. And he's like every story you see, he's talking about his family-oriented guy. That plays at Baylor. And Baylor's got the bags, especially in this sport, to do it. Do they have the resources of Kentucky or Kansas? No, money-wise, but they're pretty darn close, actually, when you factor in where they are as a program, plus the money they can throw out. It's not as big a gap as you think, as people outside of this program and this fan base think. So we're early on this one. We probably won't. The experts are not expecting a commitment until January or February. But Dybantsa has already mentioned he's going to take a visit to Baylor, and they are in that mix. And that is just that is a fun thing to be thinking about. The number one guy in the country with your hat on the table. Get it done. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by Ibotta. All right, we went over this. We got a lot going on in the summer, okay? I'm in the middle of the summer of weddings. So what comes with that is I've got a lot of stuff to buy. I've got airline tickets. I've got to buy new suits. My girlfriend's got to buy makeup. We've got to buy food for our trip. And all that can be helped with Ibotta. In fact, it's already helped me so far. It's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries, beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns over $250 a year from this. And look, I like money. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip on one of these vacations. Okay, it can get you to a really nice dinner, things like that. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, so much more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta and using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So go to the App Store, Google Play, download the free app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in Google Play or the App Store, and you're also using the code LOCKEDONCollege. Today's episode is also brought to you by Factor Meals. Look, summer, it's hectic, and you want to enjoy the weather while you can. You want to enjoy the company of people while you can. You don't want to worry too much about your meal prep, but you also want to, stay with your diet. That's where Factor Meals comes into play. They've got over 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. So you're always going to have something new to explore. You can make your entire day delicious. From breakfast to dessert to midnight snack, stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. You can treat yourself to restaurant quality meals with premium ingredients and without breaking the bank or wasting too much time. Keep the kitchen time to a minimum. All right, these Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. You don't have to shop for it, prep, cooking, or cleanup. And take that out of your life and enjoy the effortless support of your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences, help you manage the calories, maximize your protein intake, avoid meat, or just eat a well-balanced diet, which I can use. Truly. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use the code lockedoncollege50. That's 50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. I was kind of a little bit late on this, so I hope you guys don't hold this against me, but I was alerted to one of the lightning rods of Baylor Twitter, and that is Bryce Cherry, the sports editor of the Waco Trib, who has ruffled some feathers of Baylor fans in the last year or so. I like Bryce. I think he's a really good writer. And I found this one to be very interesting that this divided some people a few days ago. But he had posted something out there about Joey McGuire, the head coach at Tech, saying that Jaylen Petri is one of his favorite people from his time at Baylor, and that he deserves a statue on campus for what he meant to the program. And there were a lot of people agreeing with that, and still some others who were like, we don't want to hear from this guy. He's the Tech head coach. He shouldn't be saying anything about Baylor players, which I thought was odd. And still others who were saying, here, player X, Y, and Z also needs a statue before we get to Jaylen Petri, which I didn't think those were mutually exclusive, but here we are. As far as I know, in terms of the major sports, there's really only one Baylor athlete with a statue, and that is Robert Griffin III. There's a coach, Grant Taff, with a statue. I'm trying to think. I don't know that they have anything for Clyde Hart other than naming the track stadium after him, which is also a great honor. And of course, there's been talks in the past of some other coaches getting a statue, excuse me, around the athletic facilities as well. So back to the original question as I take a sip to make sure you guys can hear me okay. Does Jaylen Petri deserve a statue at Baylor? Yes. Yes. For a couple of reasons. First off, you could argue there's a good argument to be had out there that he's the second best defensive player ever to play football at Baylor. At least in the top 5, I would say. Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in his senior year, and was just such a Swiss Army knife. I mean, you ask coaches who have followed this team, they will tell you, yeah, he was that good. The only one that they could say definitively better, Mike Singletary. Does he deserve a statue? Probably as well. Mike Singletary is obviously like the best of all time, Hall of Famer, one of the great defensive players in NFL history, let alone Baylor. Jaylen Petri is in that second tier behind Singletary, but then again, no one's in Singletary's class. So that, and also, he was the one who stayed. The one who stayed, man. And I just, there's not enough to get that across. Like, that was such an important thing for Baylor at the time, and then even more so in retrospect for those of us who were rooting for the team, who, you know, were almost embarrassed to wear our gear out in public sometimes because of just, no matter how you think of that scandal, just the fact that the scandal was out there, it was tough to keep rooting for Baylor. And those of us did because we love this school. And Jaylen Petri showed us that he loved this school too. When everyone else was bailing out, everyone in that greatest recruiting class Baylor ever had was bailing, gone. Jaylen Petri said, no, I like Baylor. I'm going to stay here. And that meant a lot to us. And it looked like for a while he was just going to be, you know, that kind of idol, so to speak, of this is our mascot, our cheerleader, our guy who was our guy. And he wasn't getting a lot of playing time. And then the last 2-3 years of his career, all of a sudden he's out there, he's making a difference, and he becomes one of the best defensive players in the country. He becomes a consensus All-American. So those things put together, you know, the like emotional aspect of it, of him staying with Baylor, and also the player he became, both of those reasons are reasons for him to have a statue on campus. And I think of it this way. When he starts, it's obviously the scandal. He's the only one that says yes. And we talk about leaving a place better than you found it. He had just seen Baylor reach incredible highs the few years before. He gets in there. They reach very low lows, both off the field and on the field. And by the time he leaves, they have arguably the best season in the program's history. That means something, man. You know, he comes in the worst possible time in terms of all the outside noise for Baylor football. And he leaves being a huge part of the reason they turned it around. The reason they were Big 12 champs and Sugar Bowl champs and won the most games Baylor football has ever won in a season. He's a big reason why. And one of the best defenses in school history. He was the leader. He and Terrell Bernard were the two biggest reasons why. So, yeah, he does. He deserves a statue. Mike Singletary deserves a statue. Whomever. Don Troll deserves a statue. I think a couple basketball coaches deserve a statue at Baylor. I think that's fair. I think Kim Mulkey deserves a statue. I think Scott Drew deserves a statue. So this was not a question of, hey, who else at Baylor should deserve a statue? It was whether Jaylen Petri deserves one. And yes, and I am now realizing that there are a couple other players that have a statue on campus, the members of the Immortal 10, who absolutely deserve one. So yes, Jaylen Petri should be honored like that. I don't think it would be a crazy honor to like have his jersey retired. I don't think that would be too out of bounds to do that. I think there's only really one in Baylor's history, and that's number 10. Like someone will be wearing number 63 this year, Mike Singletary's number. It seems crazy. And you don't see it a lot with football, but if you're not going to do that, give him a statue. For people of my generation, Jaylen Petri means more than most Baylor athletes. And his effect on the football program is right up there. You know, it's not RG3, it's not Grant Taff, it's not Art Briles for better or for worse. But Jaylen Petri is right up there in the kind of that next tier of guys. So I'm here for it. Let me know who you think deserves a statue and whether Jaylen Petri deserves one. Drop that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment just saying anything. It helps the algorithm. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Baylor. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day, especially you everydayers out there. We will be back tomorrow with your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.